Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Winners Win podcast. We're having this conversation for the second time because the first time we did it, we got exposed to the Nairobi hustle. We sat and spoke for 3 hours, and what came out was quite special. Eric Osiakwan is, apart from being a good friend, he's an investor, he's a pioneering entrepreneur. He's someone who is very thoughtful about the African continent. He's the founder and CEO of Chanzo Capital and an innovator in his own right. Intuition is such a powerful thing. How we met is I was working at Viacom International Media Networks at the time. It was a Friday and we had scheduled a meeting. The meeting was for, I recall, 1 o'clock. They were an hour and a half delayed, but during that entire period, I recall my intuition telling me to wait, and it was absolutely worth it because since then he's been an investor in some of my businesses, a great advisor, and generally when you as an African boy are trying to build businesses on this continent, for someone to open up their network to you is a very powerful gift, and so here we are again. Eric, welcome to the Winners Win podcast.
Thank you, and I'm glad that we have the second chance.
Absolutely, absolutely.
This time we have to win.
This time we win. We've got Teddy in the building. I wanted to start by this rich history that you have within the telecoms space. So I want to go back to Eric the entrepreneur, or I want to start with Eric the entrepreneur.
Right.
And what people don't know about, what you've built and achieved.
Right. So no, thank you very much. Yeah. And I started. You talk about intuition, right? Sure. My biggest success, or what has at least brought me where I am, is I'm very intuitive. I look at the data, but ultimately I follow my intuition and I follow my guts. And I think probably 80-90% of the time, right? There's always some margins.
On following your intuition.
On follow my intuition. So I look at the data, but to ultimately follow my intuition. Yeah. And so it started that I got into the ISP industry by intuition.
Right.
I had, gotten an opportunity. I was hosting a radio show at the time, and then got a call from a gentleman who wanted to build an ISP and said, look, I've heard about you. Let's have, lunch. So went, and he wanted to build an NGO to save Africa. I said, you are a tech entrepreneur from the US, you've come to Africa. What Africa is in is a connectivity. I think connectivity will be a game changer.
Yeah.
And so that gave birth to something called Busy Internet, right, which became the first biggest internet cafe. This is now 2001. Remember those days? And like today,
going to an internet cafe was still a thing.
Yeah, internet cafe was how you got access.
Yes.
I remember in those, I used to run around with a floppy disk, and go to cafes and download stuff. So, yes. And making phone calls where you go to a phone booth or phone cards,
yes.
Yes. And so, access was not on your phone today. It was, you had to go somewhere. So we built Busy Internet, which became a very successful, biggest internet cafe.
This is in Ghana?
In Ghana.
Okay.
Clustering computers downtown Accra. And that sort of propelled me into the rest of the continent. So people want to build ISPs, they will, call me. But prior to that, what had happened was I got a consulting gig with the UNECA.
Okay.
Where we were looking at access. The UNECA had a program called the Africa Information Society Initiative.
Okay.
And the idea was to bring Africa into the information society. But it starts with connectivity. And so we had done some research and work and concluded that we needed to start looking at how do Africans get online.
Right.
And so a company like Africa Online had been started by A.C. Bakatiani, which was sort of an inspiration. And then, we did Busy Internet. And then I got an opportunity to go to Kenya, help start a business called ISP Kenya. I was involved with One2Net in Uganda. In Malawi, I helped set up Malawi Net.
By setup, are you talking infrastructure layer?
Correct.
Or Okay. Can you
So basically what happened in those days, connectivity was through dial-up or wireless.
Yes.
So dial-up is the incumbent telco. So you have a phone line and it will set up a modem,
Yes.
and then it makes some noise, then it connects you to the internet.
Yes.
And so the incumbent telcos were using that, and that was the way the gate kept the internet. And so if you didn't have a phone line from like Telecom or in Ghana Telecom, then you couldn't get internet. And then we came with an alternative, which was wireless, where we were mostly using VSAT terminals to connect to the upstream providers. Okay. And then we will put some Linksys. I don't know if you remember Linksys routers. We will bring these devices into your home and then put a satellite dish on your roof, and then connect it to a Linksys device, which just spread the Wi-Fi in the house. So that's how the internet service provider, ISPs, got into the game.
Okay.
Obviously, we had to overcome the regulatory hurdle of getting license, right? Because the incumbent telcos were gatekeeping. So, for example, in Ghana, some ISPs were shut down in those days for doing voice over IP, which is providing voice connectivity.
Right.
Today you can talk on the phone. Back then it was illegal, and that led me to start something called the Ghana ISP Association. Okay. Because I kind of realized that the industry was under threat, where the incumbent telcos were in cahoots with the regulators and shut down businesses. And what they were doing wasn't illegal. They said it was illegal, but the reality was that technology had opened opportunity for you to be able to use packets to communicate as opposed to switches, which is what the incumbent telcos were using at that time. So the Ghana ISP Association led to the African ISP Association, which became a Pan-African body that brought the ISP community together to basically begin to lobby the African Union, the African government at that level, to start realizing that the ISP were small businesses, they employed people, they create jobs, they pay taxes. Yes. And so why were you placing limitations on them in favor of the incumbent telcos who were the big, this was before the mobile guys came.
Before the mobile operators.
This was the incumbent, Telecom, Ghana Telecom, Kenya Telecom, Telecom Kenya, and these big companies, right? And so in that process also, the incumbent telcos lost the mobile wave, because a lot of people wanted phone access, access to communications. As they say, Africans like talking. Yes. And when they get on the phone, they want to talk forever.
We go.
But the incumbent telcos were not able to deliver landlines to people. They were waiting queues. I remember my dad, I was a banker. We lived in a nice home. And my dad was in a waiting queue to get a phone line to the house. It took a long time before we got a phone. And so I experienced the internet actually in high school, not at home, because the phone line could not come home.
What was the limitation? Why couldn't they deliver?
Because the incumbent telcos were the only operators. You remember, it's one provider. They do everything, and there was no competition. And so they were like, there's no hurry.
So it was a competence thing.
Exactly. And it was also a complacency because there was no competition. So the free market was not really free because you only had one operator. And so this is what gave the mobile operator the opportunity. The mobile operators came in with mobile phones and said, well, you don't actually need to get a phone latched to a box at home. You can now walk with your phone. What did you say? And then suddenly people started getting mobile phones and the mobile operators, pretty much, became bigger than the incumbent.
What was the legislative change that enabled the mobile operators to come in?
Right. So that was a very important development. Because in those days, you could not provide communication. The incumbent had the only means to do that. Right. So I was a fellow at the Harvard Law, the Beckman Center. So the first program I did when I went to Harvard as a fellow was working on these telecom policy reforms in Africa, building on the work I'd done at the UNECA, where we said, so you to provide access, there must be businesses that deliver access. Now, if the legislation says that only one guy can provide connectivity, then that legislation has to change. Correct. And this is where leveraging institutions like Harvard and coming as a fellow back to the continent allowed me to negotiate with regulators, with governments. In Ghana, we did that. Right. We liberalized the gateway. We made a case to the government. Remember the Minister of Communication, who is now His Excellency President John Mahama, was the Minister of Communication at that time. He led reforms. And I remember that's how I got to know him. We went through a fairly long process, but he saw reasoning in what we wanted to do and said, yes, the gateway, gateway, which is what they call them, that must be liberalized. And so, a lot of credit to him. He sort of led telecom reforms in Africa that allowed other operators to have international gateway. So international gateway means that you can make communications outside of the country.
Right.
Now, remember the incumbent telco, because they were gatekeepers, means that every communication goes through them. And they were also owned by the government. So they were basically making a lot of money for the government. So in some ways, there was there was little to no incentive to open the gateway, because the incumbent said, but we are giving all the money is coming from that. So for example, the voice over IP crackdown that I talked about in Ghana was because the incumbent telcos were not getting the international calling money that they used to get.
Right.
Let me give you a very interesting story. When I was in high school, my dad, one of my first uncles that first went to the US, Uncle Constantine, my dad would send me to the post office. I had to go and book a call for him to talk to his brother.
You had to go book a call?
Yes. Okay. And I had to go to the central post office where the Telecom, the international gateway. So you book a call. So I go to there and I book a call in 3 months.
That's crazy.
The day of the call, I will go and stand in the queue until my dad comes, and then he's turn to make the call. And when he gets on the phone, you have to talk 3 minutes.
and be done with your business.
After 3 minutes, so you have a limit of first 3 minutes call, and it was something like $15, $20, right? And after 3 minutes, every other minute is $20.
Okay.
Today we talk on WhatsApp and have long conversations, so we don't even think. But that's how it was back then.
That's
right?
crazy.
So it means that incumbent telcos made a lot of money, and a lot of that money went to the government. And so when voice over IP came, it was like, where is the money? Suddenly their revenues had dwindled significantly. And they said, well, it's because the ISPs that you liberalize are not doing voice over IP. So people are talking on the phone. So they don't come to book calls anymore. Eric, we don't see him anymore. So
because he has to book a call for 3 months.
Yeah.
But wait, was that an innovation problem, a capacity problem, or just pure gatekeeping?
All three.
Okay.
But you see, if you didn't bring down the gates, then the innovation will not work.
Right.
Okay, you could take a risk and ask for remission of things later. But the point is that sometimes you may not got the opportunity to even innovate because the environment is stifling.
Okay.
Right. So I think those policy reforms worked. I remember we hosted the first ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assignment Numbers meeting in Ghana in 2001. And so we brought people from Harvard. The whole internet community came to Ghana. Okay. It was the second time, I think South Africa had hosted before us or after. And I remember we took them to the ministry. We had government people there, and they were like, this is going to change Ghana and going to change the continent. And so that opened up the market significantly.
Right.
And through that trip, it was after that trip that I became a fellow at Harvard.
Okay.
Because, the fellows that came, I met Esther Dyson, who's now my board chair, and actually later on grounded me into angel investing. Okay. She was the chairman of ICANN then. So those efforts really started spreading across the continent, as I said. And so in Kenya, there was liberalization. In Nigeria, in Senegal, in Ivory Coast, companies like Africa Online started having multiple operations across the continent. IEC, Makatiani, Amolo, and Karanja, they were the founders of Africa Online. Okay. Built a Pan-African operation. They were in about 12 countries at some point. They were a big inspiration. So I created, together with others, we founded the African ISP Association. Okay. And because we felt that there was a need to start also playing at a Pan-African level. And this allowed us to create a stronger force. Okay. So it was not just at a country level where you had, the national ISP associations, but you had the Pan-African ISP Association. And actually, fast forward, we actually got the African Union to host a summit on ICTs in Africa. Okay. And at that summit, the governments, the heads of state signed, decrees, communicate to allow innovation and entrepreneurship and technology to thrive. Okay. So all of them created ICT policies. Today, if you see ICT, permeating the continent, that was a key part of that. It led to regulatory reforms. Right. It led to policy room for innovation. And Rwanda, for example, is an example where President Kagame himself sat in meetings with, us creating ICT policies. Okay. And today Rwanda is far ahead in certain metrics. So those efforts, one of the final examples of that is that we created something called the African Internet Exchange System. Okay. It became an African Union project, and it's running today, okay, as we speak.
The African what?
African Internet Exchange System. Okay. The African Internet Exchange System was a system that we created to create the local internet fabric. The internet is really a network of networks. It's basically computers talking to each other. Now, back then, we had to transit communication through Europe or the US because remember, we didn't have networks that span the continent. Mm-hmm. So the African Internet Exchange System was a way to build the African Internet fabric. And so that meant that at the national level, mm-hmm, we created local internet exchange points, okay, ISPs. That meant that you route local traffic locally. Mm-hmm. And then next level was route the traffic across countries. Okay. So that if I was sending an email to you in South Africa and I was in Ghana, now the email doesn't have to go to Europe and go to the US and route before coming to Kenya or to South Africa. Okay. With the African Internet System, the internet can go straight from Ghana to South Africa. Okay.
Is that, and what's the byproduct of that institution? Is this data centers?
That has led to data centers creation. That has led to terrestrial yes, fiber infrastructure. Yes. That has led to creation of all these local data repositories, because now the transit is happening on the continent, right? Okay. So what we did was created this infrastructural framework for Africa to start hosting its own fabric of the internet that then connects to the global internet through the subsea fiber cables that we built, which was sort of the second iteration of my entrepreneurial career. Okay. So when I, in 06, 07, I became a fellow at Stanford. And prior to that, we had created this competitive retail ISP industry, as I mentioned. But going upstream, which is connecting to the global internet, right, it was all through one subsea fiber cable. Okay. And majority of the others were through satellite, as I mentioned. And satellite was slow and very expensive, right, and had high latency. So in those days also, what it meant is that certain applications you couldn't run over satellite just because of latency. Okay. Right. So you needed a combination of both satellite and fiber infrastructure. Okay. But imagine that in 06, up until 07, 08, the whole of Africa had one subsea fiber cable called SAT3 that ran from Sesimbra in Portugal all the way down. Then it comes to Cape Verde and stops in Senegal, then stops in Ivory Coast, then Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, Angola.
This is a physical line.
It's a physical cable that you put under the seabed. So it's a cable that you bury under the sea, and it's for communication. Fiber is the fastest means of transmission. It's light, right? Yes. And so it carried much more traffic and can move much more traffic faster and with high latency. Okay. So you needed that to be the backbone of the international communication architecture. So for example, at that time, there were about 16 subsea cables that ran between Europe and the US. Oh, wow. In the US alone, they had multiple ones that ran between the northern part of the US and then the southern part of the US.
Just domestically.
Right. Yeah. And then in Europe, there were so many of them. Okay. Right. And so, there's a map that I looked at where the rest of the world had all these subsea cables. And the biggest continent, which is Africa, had only one that ran from, it ran on the western coast and went all the way down to Southern Africa through Angola, then went up to Mauritius, then went to the Indian Ocean. And so the eastern part of Africa didn't have any subsea cable. Okay. And so my big audacious vision at that time when I went to the Stanford program, which was a program funded by the Reuters Foundation, where they brought what they call digital visionaries to the Valley. Okay. And you study at Stanford, you take classes, but also you have to work on a project that you create a solution, you come with a problem. During the program, you create a solution, and then after the program, you come back and implement.
Okay.
So my big thing was I wanted to build subsea cables. People thought it was crazy. I remember people laughed me out of the room. But I just felt that Africa needed to have this infrastructure in order to be competitive, to be part of the global development at that time. And so, so when I went there, I did a lot of research, and chanced upon open access. Open access. Okay. Open access was a framework in academic publishing. So I studied that framework, and I said these principles around open access can be applied to the telecom world. Okay. And so I came up with an open access model concept paper, which got a lot of notoriety. Okay. Fast forward, we wrote a study with the World Bank on how to apply that to Africa to build backbone infrastructure. Okay. And I got invited by the Kenyan government, so we built the first open access subsea cable in East Africa called the East African Marine System.
So that was your business? Your business was building?
Yeah, so I studied how to build subsea cables and got an opportunity to build one from scratch. Okay. And we did it in 2007, 2008 during the Kenyan election violence. Actually, got me a TED fellow. That's how I became a TED fellow.
Oh, I see.
And luckily for me, the Kenyan government invited me. So it was almost divine, because I had sort of done the theory, right? I done the theoretical part of how this should work, and then you get an opportunity to say, okay, let's build the thing, let's do it, right? So for me, it was again, follow your intuition. I remember when I got that email, some part of me was done doing it, and some part of me was like, no, this is the next thing to do, right? So I followed my intuition. Met Bitange Deme, who was the permanent secretary at the ministry in Kenya then. He's now a very great friend, and he said, Eric, we have to build this cable now, and the open access model is the way to do it. We've tried other things, and we've struggled a little bit. When I read your paper, I just felt that this is what we need to do. But elections are coming, and but I really think that we should do it. And I said, yes, I felt the same way. So we went on this journey together with about 10, 12 people. We met at the ministry. We created a public-private partnership. We met all the way through the elections into Christmas. When the election violence was happening, we were busy connecting, planning and executing the cable. Okay. It came on stream right after in 2009. Other cables like Telecom followed. Today, Africa has 21 subsea cables using the open access model. And in my view, that single decision is what catapulted Kenya to become what you call Silicon Savannah today, because they now had plethora of subsea cable connectivity infrastructure. And so once people are connected to the internet and they see what people are doing, the next thing they want to build. Absolutely. And that is what led to sort of this new generation of entrepreneurs that are experiencing the internet in their own way, and they believe they can build the next big thing. Yeah. They said they can build the next Facebook, we can build the next Google. And so when I exited that business, I decided to start mentoring some of these guys, and then started investing my own capital.
Before we get into the exit, if you go back to what was the business model for a business like that? Yeah. Do you build it and then hope your government gets an uptake? After you've now laid the cable, what are the toll fees, if any? Like, what's the
very good question. So it was a very, very different business model then. The model that existed was a closed club consortium model, which is normally the big boys get together and say, okay, we're going to build so that's how SAT3 was built. Is the incumbent telcos, they are the gatekeepers in the countries, remember? Yes. And so they will say, okay, we're going to then be in Ghana Telecom will be the gatekeeper. In Cameroon, Camtel will be the gatekeeper. In South Africa, it's Telecom. And they will set the fees. And yet, they also compete with the ISPs in the retail market. So basically, your competitor is the one that you're buying for. Yes. The referee is the one you are playing against. Okay. You get it. And then, and then the government is actually the official for the game. And the government gets money from the referee.
Oh my God.
And the referee is the guy you're playing against, right? So the open access model concept was like, you need to disaggregate this. Okay. And then you need to create a level playing field that applies certain principles across the network stack. And so what it meant was that if the big boys want to play as infrastructure players, then they stay in the infrastructure league. Okay. And therefore, they must be disaggregated from competing in the
retail and
the retail. Exactly. And so part of the concept was to evolve what you call carriers, where that carrier just carries backbone infrastructure. Okay. And there can be multiple of them. but they compete at a career level.
I think you told me Alcatel is one of them.
Yeah, Alcatel built, the subsea cable.
Okay.
Tyco was, the US version. So we went to Alcatel, we went to Tyco when we're building, we went to their production facility. So these fiber assets are built from scratch, right? So after you've done all the paperwork, then you go to somebody who builds them like Alcatel or Tyco, and then they will provision you, bombard you, and then there's a whole process where the physical cable is built from scratch, and then it's loaded onto ships that then get on the high seas, and then the ships come and dock at the the shore of where it will start, and then they'll start laying on the seabed, and then goes all the way. So in our case for Teams, it went all the way to Fujairah in the Middle East because Etisalat was our other partner, and so we built from Mombasa in Kenya, and the ship went all the way and docked the end of the cable in Fujairah. Now, to the business model, so how does it work? It's like building a road.
Yes.
Now, when you build a road, it's great, but if you don't have a toll booth that collects the money, people use the road and you won't people pay taxes, so you can put in the tax, right? But in this case, because it's a specialized infrastructure, and it has a time limit, you had to find a way of, collecting the money. So in physical road infrastructure, they put a toll booth, and then, when you use it, you pay, right? In our case, you have to deliver a service on the road. So in most cases, the road is important, but it does not deliver the money or the service.
Right.
It's the transport services that run on the road that then makes money from people.
Got you.
Right. And so it became clear that you need to have a telecom business that then sells the capacity, your portion of the road infrastructure, and that will make you money. And so when we finished, so when we by the time when the cable came live, and we realized that, so who are now the operators is the mobile providers, because everybody was on mobile. So it became clear that even the ISP business was going to struggle because the mobile operators had moved from the phones being dumb to being smart.
Yes.
Now you have one device that gives you voice, but now you can connect it to the internet. So why would you need another provider coming to you with some Linksys router device, and now that one is in your house? Okay, you can use that for backup. But for me, it became clear to me that the mobile operators, the mobile was the way to go. And so Africa became a mobile first continent. Because majority of the people had phones already, and all they needed was a phone to be smart. And the mobile operators are also smart that they also bought into some of the fiber infrastructure projects. And so they had a capacity and they had the network to sell the capacity. So if you didn't have the network to sell the capacity, then you're also at a disadvantage, right? And so we exited our stake on that. Some guys came to us and made us sort of the best offer that one cannot resist.
Congratulations! Yes.
So that
was that the first exit, or had you flirted with other exits?
No, I'd done some exits before. The ISP business. So let me tell you another interesting story in the ISP, talking about instinct. So we had built all these ISPs, and I was involved in businesses across multiple countries. Then the mobile operators, the technology called Edge. Before today we say 5G, there was something came called Edge.
Yes.
Which was the first
with the capital
time
letters.
It was the first technology that allowed a mobile phone to be able to connect to the internet. When I first saw that technology, instinctively I knew the ISP business was over. I remember I gave an interview to a gentleman called Russell Southwood. Russell Southwood used to write a newspaper on telecoms in Africa. And he wrote an article that he titled, I can't remember, "The King is Dead, Long Live the King," or something, where, it was the premise of this argument that the mobile operators are going to be the next ISP. They're going to, because now the mobile device has become smart. It's not just for talking. It now can connect to the internet. So I started going to the ISPs in which I was involved in. And I remember I was a single minority position, so I owned very little stakes because I had gone in as a consultant to help build and help get it off the ground. And so the other guys had a majority stake. And so I've gone to them, I'll go to meetings and say, "Hey guys, I think the mobile operators are going to win this game. So let's find a way of thinking about exit." And some of the guys laughed me out of the room. Actually, there was a story in Uganda where, by the end of that year, that ISP had lost 75% of its business in 1 year. Because a mobile operator entered that market and launched a business, an internet business where it said, connect to your phone and get internet for free.
Yes.
Who is going
to decline?
Who's going to decline that offer? The mobile operator can do that because they had big balance sheet. So once the customers switch to them, after 1 year, the ISPs there, then they start charging them. Life goes on.
And life goes on. I'm just thinking now, what was the consumer journey and how did the ISPs introduce access to the internet to consumers? How was that done? Because I'm sure it was an education process.
It was an education process. So actually, I told you I had a radio show.
Yes.
I've been writing articles about it. I used to, I still write. I had a writing career since then. I remember I had a column in the Daily Graphic, which was the leading newspaper in Ghana. Every week, I used to write a column on the internet on how to connect, and that's how I got customers. So I became also a thought leader. In the introduction was kind of you to say, but that's where I developed it from. Because I felt that you needed to educate people, because people thought it was from my own experience as well. Right. So I told you my experience that I first saw the internet in high school when I went to the computer lab and I connected to the internet for the first time, and it was just mind blowing. I remember I spent almost 5 hours. I was in that lab until it became dark, and I was being asked, and I didn't see where the darkness came because I was just fascinated. I was sitting on this computer. I typed www. In those days it was Hotmail and MSN. And I could see news about the US, about Europe. I could read about things that were just going on. For me, it was just like, it was...
Suddenly the world is open.
Suddenly the world was at my fingertips. And so I just felt that this is something that would change the world, again, instinctively. And so... And I didn't believe that when people started experiencing the internet, it was the same kind of experience that you got, right? And so I felt that, okay, the way to get this out is you need to get people to understand how this thing works. Okay. So that's how I started writing. And actually, my first article, I actually went to the editor of the Daily Graphic. I booked an appointment, and I'd written 12 pieces already. Okay. He couldn't believe it. He said, but you're not a journalist. I said, no, I know I'm not a journalist, but I think the internet is going to change people's lives. And it's important for the national newspaper to have a column on writing. Can you imagine? I'm not a journalist. I'm asking to have a column dedicated to writing. And then he said, and then, of course, he was, I remember Elvis he passed. Very interesting. He, gave me an appointment in his office, and he listened to me. And then I knew that in his mind was, okay, I'll ask this guy one question, and he asked me, so, okay, we'll do it. And when are you able to submit an article? Then I brought my floppy disks. I have 12 articles. He was shocked. So he slotted it to his computer, and then he turned and looked at me. In those days, he will have a desk which he writes on, and then the side is the computer, if you remember. So he moves, and then he puts the disk in, and then he turns back. He was blown away. He said, "Oh, young man, this is unbelievable. Sure. But it's a little technical. I'll be your editor." So the editor of the Daily Graphic became my editor for my first set of
made it
articles.
Friendly to consumers.
Yeah. So he said, I will make it, there's some technical jargons, I'll take it, but I get your point. This will be a game changer. So I started writing about the internet in 2001. Actually in 2000, I think it was 2099 or something like that. Okay. And that's how kind of... So how did I build, so people started reading, and then, people will be interested. And fast forward, I got invited to start a radio show. One of the first radio shows on ICTs in Ghana, called ICT World on Choice FM. Yes. And so people, that's how I believe that people, of course, people heard it through different means as well, not just my radio show, my writing. So how do you introduce to people? I guess that when people started realizing that this is something that, you can read about America, you can read about Europe, you can access things, information, it's just fascinating, right? And obviously the biggest barrier was cost. Right. But now, it costs you a lot. You have to get a phone line, then you have to wait for a modem. And so earlier on, I started forming images or, imaginations of how do you make it affordable and accessible. Okay. Right. And that has kind of been, in my view, that has been the catalyst for my career. I always wanted to find a way to make internet accessible and affordable. And so helping build ISPs for one of the ways, because it's a smaller business, fewer people, you have lower overheads, so then you're not translating. But if you are a big telco, your overheads are very high. Yes. And so you have to translate it to the customer. So one of the advantages that we had back then was that we could make internet affordable because we are running a smaller ship, which didn't have a lot of overhead, which was sort of the advantage that David had over Goliath.
Yes.
Right. So we had that kind of David Goliath situation. But then to be able to deliver that, you need to have the upstream connectivity. And Goliath had the upstream connectivity. So then we had to go up against Goliath, right?
Got you.
Actually, there's a book that I was involved in writing called Negotiating the Net in Africa, The Politics of Internet Diffusion, in which we use the David Goliath analogy, that the incumbents were the Goliaths and the new entrant, the ISP, were the David. They were the smaller, nimble operators, and they eventually overcame the Goliaths. So there's a whole book on this that looked at internet penetration in, I think it was 5 countries. I wrote the Ghana chapter, edited by one of my academic supervisors, Professor Ernest Wilson, where he looked at what are the issues behind internet diffusion. So this book was about, internet has grown in Africa. We've seen the numbers go up, but what are the issues behind the numbers? What are the story? What led to internet penetration? How did it happen in South Africa? How did they liberalize the gateway in South Africa? In Ghana, what were the issues? So we talked about voice over IP, for example. Building internet exchange points meant that the internet traffic is now local. And so the guys who are making money from the gateway, of course, will fight back, right? Like I said, so we documented issues like this. So that book is another fascinating book, actually, that if you want to really understand how, the Davids, overcame the Goliaths in making internet penetration work in Africa, it's a very important book. That sampled 5 countries and goes into details largely. So the business model at that time was really retail. So you buy upstream connectivity and you sold down. But the business, the unit economics was very interesting. So you basically buy a bandwidth for 1 megabit, and the contention ratio was, I think those days, 1 to 10 or 1 to 20. And so you are assuming that I can sell 1 megabit to 20 people max, and because 20 people are the max.
Contention ratio, what is that?
Which means how many people can use it concurrently at a point in time.
I see.
Right, so that they had the same experience, and beyond that, the experience deteriorates. Right, and so
like the optimal level.
Correct, the optimal level for multiple access to the same road. So if they build they build a 3-lane road. Beyond 3 lane,
there's somebody on the side.
Then somebody has to fall off. Correct. So you have to build that, and then in your mind is so I've got to sell this 1 megabit to 20 people max, and I assume that only 5 of them will be online at the point in time. If I sold it to 50, I want to assume that then that's it. I've maxed out. Right. So that's the model. Then you ask yourself, which market segment am I targeting? Am I going corporate, or am I doing consumer, or am I doing enterprise? And now enterprise means that obviously they need high speed access, so it's more expensive. They'll be on the higher end of this food chain. So obviously they will pay you more, but they will want to have what they call a certain cap. So they will say we want dedicated. In those days, they used to have dedicated bandwidth. Today, those technologies are all gone. But you need to sell dedicated as a product. Dedicated was a product.
Now it's generally unlimited.
Generally unlimited. But there was a time when it
was dedicated. And it was genuinely dedicated.
It was a product. And you paid for it, and it was very expensive.
Oh man.
Then people used to buy 1 megabit for $12,000. I have sold bandwidth to people. It's surprising why I'm not in jail, because today, when I look at it today, I sold 1 megabit, not 1 gigabit.
1 megabit, for 1 MB.
For $12,000.
It's a crime.
Today, that would be a crime. Today, I'll be in jail.
And they bought it.
And people bought it. I remember. I helped set up an ISP. Let me give you a story in my time at Abuja.
Yes.
2 Nigerian business partners, Pius Bakari and a very great friend, reached out to me. They want to set up an ISP. At that time, Abuja had been built as a city. And the wealthy part of Abuja was a place called Maitama. And so we said, we're going to build ISP and we're going to sell to the big boys there. We sold 1 megabit for $24,000. We walk out with cash. You know? So it's quite a bit of history. We'll go to the big boy's house. We set up a Visa dish, and then he will call his friends. Come and see, I have this new dish in my house. Okay. It's talking directly to the internet. I can't talk to God from here.
But at the time, did it feel like what it feels now, or it was just, this is the value we are providing?
Correct.
And therefore,
yes.
Right?
For me, it was that we were selling a value that didn't exist.
Yes.
Right. People didn't have connectivity. Right. And so, and also that's how we were able to subsidize the downstream. So we sold to, less economically endowed people for cheaper.
Yes.
But, we had created a segment, as I said, so, those who afford, you sell them a highest price, but then you sell to you also have sort of the general pool. So there's the dedicated and then the undedicated with the limited. So that one, you get 1 megabit, maybe you pay $500, but you are there with 10 other people. So I remember, we had products like, the mobile operators have this midnight calling that we have that then. People who used to serve only, there used to be product where you serve only at night. Why? Because at night, most corporates are asleep.
There's no congestion.
So we had products where people only connected at night.
Which you sold.
We sold products like, which was the cheapest product. And people will stay up at night and download so many, because yes, it's 24 hours. The internet you bought asking for 24 hours. So we had products like that.
That's
where people just, stay at night. And we used to do a lot of big downloads at night. Yeah. And we introduced caching servers where, so at night you download all the big movies and then you put it on your server and then you stream it on your network.
Morning you watch it.
So during the day people will watch movies still and they think it's live, but it's through a caching server. But the internet is all caching. It's really how it works. It's all caching, where you duplicate the resource on different material, servers in different places, and so then people access it. So it's just so that's how we beat that built.
Would you then say, and before I get to the iBurst story,
yes,
would you then say that based on that experience, that pricing model, and what people are saying today, the cost of data is too high?
Yeah.
Is this unrealistic? Are we now just at a point where we're complaining about, because we don't know the story of Africa's internet evolution?
And also demand has grown exponentially. These devices have become way more smarter. And today is all video, right? Back in the day, it was text and a few moving images, today, or spoken word. But today, moving images is the future, right? All the apps are all moving images. And obviously, moving images and spoken word combined takes much more resource, right? And so, yes, internet penetration has grown, but it's more operators, there's more bandwidth, but the demand has been much more exponential because the resources that people want to access on the internet has just gone through the roof, right? And so the question then that begs is the business model that could make an operator win. And I can understand the struggle. Some of this stuff were things that I kind of thought about then and realized that then there's the incremental investment that you need to make in infrastructure in order to deliver service just require that you have very deep pockets. Right. And have a longer time horizon. And so if you put $1 billion into your network, right, that's capital investment that you've made. It's going to take you 5-7 years to recoup that investment. And so you see some of the manifestation in some of the operators say, look, we've done 4G investment. We haven't recouped the money and you want us to go to 5G. No, and it makes sense because you have to make those strong capital, huge capital investments in upgrading the network to be able to deliver the service. And if you've done those investments and you haven't recouped, then it's difficult for you to then make another investment because 5G means I have to upgrade the network again. I have to invest. And that 5G technology is not 1 billion, it's 5 billion.
For sure.
Right? So there needs to be huge capital investments that go into delivering the service. And if I haven't recouped, then I'm going to have questions for my financiers and my board. So I can understand. But then somebody will say, okay, then maybe you want to take sort of a different business model where you're looking at, low margin, high volume.
Right.
But low margin, high volume also means that you have to have the ability to reach the volume.
Yes.
Now that reach again requires investment. So you need to go to places that have more people. And some of those places are not as economically endowed, and so they have, in some cases, less disposable income. And so they cannot afford the, 1 gig at, let's say 100 rand, maybe they can do 20 rand. Until you've seen models that are evolved that are more, rural or semi-urban. Actually, one of our businesses, you interviewed my partner Tinyiko on this podcast. He told you what we're doing with Mavoni, where we then said, okay, how do we now go and understand these, less economically endowed communities and understand what their disposable income is, understand the dynamics of those communities, and deliver a connectivity to them in a way that is both impactful but we can make money, right? And that requires a different level of even building your network,
right.
The tools that you use, the technologies that you use, the way you provision the network, the way you deliver the service, the business model is different. And so a big operator may not say, may say, look, I'm not going to stay in the urban cities and, cream off the top, which is fine.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that. And so you begin to see, different operators with different models in different segments of the economy. And I think that makes for a free market, for sure. Competition.
Tell me then, what is the relationship between, so when an entrepreneur or entrepreneurs make this level of investment, this sort of infrastructure becomes something that benefits a country or whatever, or a nation state. What is government's approach to how they treat that infrastructure? One, who owns the infrastructure? Is it still the private company, or is it sort of a give and take between the state giving you the license and then you have to comply with those license requirements? Because, and I'm saying this in the context of where a regime is not happy and they want to throttle communication. Do you understand where I'm going with that?
No, we've seen that. We've seen that. In different countries, I think there are probably generally 3 models that have kind of evolved in terms of how you lay the infrastructure. There are those that have been predominantly government sort of led infrastructure developments. If you go to places like Rwanda, etc., where it's very, government led, because government has a social contract to deliver infrastructure to the people. And then you have the other extreme where you've had private sector, deliver infrastructure in markets where it's very predominantly free market economy on the back of democratic tenants. And then the third is somewhere hybrid between the two,
right?
Where you've had a mix of public-private partnership. For example, the team subsea cable that we did in Kenya was one of those that was in the middle, where we partnered with the government of Kenya as private actors, and we included mobile operators and the ISPs, we put our resources together and funded the cable. And then, because we're on an open access basis, our ownership of the cable had nothing to do with the service delivery side. And so we all then competed equally in access to that resource.
Say that again, the ownership of the cable had nothing to do with service delivery.
Correct. So the open access model principles basically says that when you are an owner in the infrastructure that is built, you are compensated for returns from that infrastructure.
I see.
If you are a service provider, that has no correlation to your ownership. In the previous closed club consortium, it's directly correlated.
Okay.
So it means that if you didn't make an investment in the cable, you don't have access to the cable. So you don't even compete in the market.
Okay.
Right.
You didn't participate.
You didn't participate. So we kind of disaggregated that connection. So it meant that even if you're an operator in the market, you can, and you didn't invest in the cable, you could still also go to the cable providers, buy access, and you had a level playing field to compete. Gotcha. Obviously, the practical manifestation of this, we'll see. You go to the market. For sure. It worked in different ways. Actually, the second implementation of the open access model was then, like I said, to create a layered approach where you had infrastructure providers, so what we were calling carriers. So In Ghana, we almost did it, but unfortunately, there was a regime change and the new leadership didn't follow it, where we were involved in a process to create a national communication backbone company, NCBC, I remember that, where that company was just going to be a national infrastructure provider for the telecom industry. And it was the framework at that time was take the existing fiber assets from the existing operators and then put it into this carrier. Everybody that contributed assets became a shareholder. And so that company then became the one that developed a national infrastructure, but that didn't compete in the service delivery.
Okay.
And then all the operators then compete in the service delivery. And they can go to that provider and get and buy capacity. Mm-hmm. Now, that provider can then also get competition from other providers who want to deliver infrastructure. Okay. So it wasn't that we're creating a monopoly. The idea was that you were disaggregating the infrastructure from the service delivery, because the capital requirement and the business model for infrastructure investment are synchronized different from the service level. And if somebody has to invest in building the infrastructure in order to deliver a service, they will translate the cost. And so it meant that the cost of services will take a long time to go down, right? Just because of the infrastructure cost involved. Okay. But if you disaggregated infrastructure investment, then somebody could easily launch an ISP without necessarily having to build infrastructure. So that was the thinking, right? Okay. And so that meant that you need to use a combination of private capital and public capital to look at that infrastructure outlay. Or if there's public capital, like I said, in certain cases, it was purely public capital that created the infrastructure. But that also then creates sort of another situation where if it's public capital, then it's kind of run in a public way, right? So in some cases, it may not be very efficient. But if you have an infusion of private capital and you allow it to run, as a private business, then it's much more efficient, can deliver better services. It can be open to competition. Other people can come. You get the whole idea, right? And so that was sort of a second, manifestation of the open access model. Fortunately, I think we didn't quite get any example to work. Like I said, we tried doing Ghana, and then there was a regime change, and the new regime didn't kind of see it.
And if you look what you envisioned and where we are now, have we come far enough?
We've come very far, but we still have a long way to go.
Okay.
One of the jokes that I get from my friends is, Eric, you say you involved building all this internet, but the internet is too slow, my friend. Why is the internet so slow?
And so with that, if an entrepreneur today comes to you and says, where are the opportunities in the ICT space in 2025 on this continent, pick whatever country or market you want to direct to, where are those opportunities?
There's still opportunities in infrastructure, probably. But I would say that, with 21 subsea cables circling the continent, I think that probably the real challenge is now how do you create multiple terrestrial fiber links that then carries that capacity of the beach inland, right? And that means that you have to either put it on the rail infrastructure, or you have to dig the ground.
Trenches.
And that's not cheap. Trenching is 90% of the cost of building that sort of infrastructure. So, there are companies that are doing that, but there's still a lot more to be done in that area. So think about it this way. Ghana has probably 7 or 8 subsea fiber cables landing at the beach. Okay. Together, they may be probably 10 terabits per second on the beach. But majority of Ghanaians don't live on the beach. They live inland.
For sure.
So the question now is you need to be able to build infrastructure that carries the 4 terabits or 10 terabits that's still on the beach inland, right? So the reality is that, and a lot of the people who are looking to connect are looking to have access to resources on the internet that probably majority of it sits outside the continent. That's why the terrestrial fiber is important. But another way of thinking about it is that if they're accessing, let's say, Google resources, and now Google has data centers on the continent, they probably don't need the 10 terabits. They don't need to access go out all the time. Okay. So then the second is that demand for data centers, right? Gotcha. So that hold the content on the continent. So the more data centers that there are, So that's become part of the fabric that you need.
How many do we have on the continent? Do you know?
It's growing very fast. Okay. It's growing. I don't think I have the exact numbers of but I can find it later. But there's still a lot of room there, right? Okay. And then on top of that is now so that if there are data centers, then a lot of people are building applications on the continent will now host on the continent. Mm-hmm. Now, if they're hosting on the continent, then now the challenge is the terrestrial fiber that I talked about becomes relevant. So now, if the data center is sitting in Ethiopia, then everybody from West Africa, Central, can access it. Right? So then the traffic goes straight to So the key thing now is to invest in that terrestrial infrastructure. It's similar to other terrestrial infrastructure. You heard about the real infrastructure. How come we don't have a real train network going from Cape to Cairo? That's never been talked about and if you're building a Cape to Cairo train track, we put a fiber along that train track. So suddenly you've killed two birds with one stone. The incremental cost of putting a fiber on that train track from Cairo to Cape Town is probably 10% of the cost of building that infrastructure.
So ideally...
Actually, when we did the open access model study, this is one of the recommendations we made back then. But
it just hit me now.
But it didn't get implemented.
So ideally, when you are building roads, you're trenching, you're developing those roads, you should be laying...
And the key infrastructure you're laying there is the ducting. You are creating the hole. Mm. When they build holes, when they build roads, they put gutters.
Yes.
So put another hole that for cables to go. So that next time when somebody needs to put the cable, they're not digging. I'm sure they've dug in front of your house 2 or 3 times. Anytime somebody wants to build, they come and dig. So if the provider has to be digging in front of your house, of course he will translate the cost to you. He has to have laborers come. Correct. He has to get way bill. All that is cost, right? But if the government building a road in front of your house had put a ducting, then if an ISP number 20 comes, all he goes is, I need a little space in the duct.
It's like a socket. You just pull through. Then he's able to deliver the service cheaper. When we did the open access model, it's one of the key recommendations that we put in there. We actually told the World Bank, you should make this a condition for all the loans.
For the loans and infrastructure build out in Africa. But
they refused.
C'est la vie, as they say in French.
Oh, that's fascinating. How do you get into VC?
So, as I said, so when we got out of Teams, the subsea fiber business, what became clear to me was that business required deeper pockets and maybe much more sort of infrastructural investments. Whilst I was doing that, actually, I started mentoring a few startups, because I'd built, ISPs and all this stuff. I kind of had a bit of a calling card to have entrepreneurs come to me and say, hey, Eric, I want to be a mentor. Can you help me? I'm trying to start this tech business. So it started with just, mentoring, advising, and then end of the month comes, we can't pay salaries, so we need to buy a printer. And so, maybe I can do that. So I kind of was, again, another instinctive situation where I didn't actually plan to be an investor. So I started doing this. And I remember I'd gone back to Esther Dyson. I told you Esther, I met her in 2001. She supported the Ghana New Ventures competition, which was a business plan competition I started back then. So actually the roots of investing started in 2002, where I did this business plan competition. Anyway, so fast forward. She said, Eric, what you're doing is angel investing. That's what I do. Entrepreneurs come to me, they have an idea, we talk through it. It's an idea and I help them shape it. And then they slowly, and I give them a little bit of money, then they go and create the first minimum viable product. This was prototype before a minimum viable product became the thing and the product. And then once they have something that people can see, this is, actually the idea that Ted had, okay, I can see it now. Then you go to the market with it. So I try to get product market fit.
Yes.
MFP. And then once you able to do that, then you go back and raise some money and build a team. And so I started doing this, this was 2010, 2011, of course, when I started the business, I could have took some time off to just also, cool off a little bit and recover. But increasingly I was getting, this demand was coming in. And I realized that I was enjoying talking to founders. I was not the one in the driving seat anymore. So the pressure is off my back.
For sure.
But because I've done it many times and I know the ropes, I could advise a founder, I think, so that's how it started. And then I started, putting a little bit of capital here and there. And then I noticed that a few of my friends were also doing that, And so in 2013, I started something called Angel Africa List. I kind of said, why don't we create an online platform like Angel List? And that didn't quite take off, but it led to me realizing that actually people wanted to see the founders before they invested in them. So it's just not enough to see their profile online and say,
Got you. I was about to ask, well, why didn't it work?
Right, because I had been meeting the founders, and that's how I could build conviction.
Okay.
The other guys that I sent it to, they're like, okay, I haven't met the founders. So I said, okay, I'll do an event and bring the founders around, and then you can hang with them and see whether you like their face. And we did the first event here in Johannesburg in 2013. We partnered with ArtLogic, who were the owners of Joburg Art Fair. And that first event, 3 deals happened on the spot. We did it a day before the opening day of the fair. So we call it the art of emerging businesses before the business of art.
Right.
And I remember Russell South wrote an article, The Angels Are Over Johannesburg.
Okay.
It was our first event, and it was looking back today. We partnered with the ecosystem people, brought all the investors, Cape Town, Joburg.
Tell me this: when people make this argument that on this continent we should be focused on SMMEs and less startups, because startups are trying to sometimes solve non-issues. Yeah. What is your view on that?
Fair point. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both.
Right.
I definitely do think that there are SMEs that solve very critical problems, but you also need to support startups that are solving problems. And from where I sit, mostly using technology, right? So there are also startups that are non-tech. And I only do tech because that's what I know and that's what I've got some experience in, clouting. So I do subscribe. I don't think it's one or the other. Okay. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. It's a question of you have to do which falls within your domain. So I focus on startups and tech because that's what I know and I invest in. If the guys supporting SMEs that, create other sorts of problems like water, health, I think you need all of that on the continent. So but I think that the key thing is having more local capital driving the agenda, because I think local capital has a character that is more contextualized and more apt, And I'm not saying that at the exclusion of non-local capital, but I think a balance between the two is what is needed. And so, in some cases, if you have foreign capital outweighing local capital, then, like I said, capital has a character, right? Because it will bring with the foreign character and maybe solving problems that you say maybe are not relevant, because maybe that problem is what is prevalent from where the capital is coming from.
Got you. And they can relate closely to it.
Correct. Exactly.
Tell me, what's the business model for VC? For someone who's watching now has no idea how the VC business model works. How does that model work?
So it's something called the power law.
Okay.
The power law is basically saying that you invest in 10 companies at a very early stage. So at a very early stage, the probability that a company will succeed is 10%. It doesn't matter how good the idea is. I don't know how great the entrepreneur is, how experienced the person is. The level of fatality is so high at an early stage. And so the power law is that you invest in 10. The assumption is that 9 will fail, but you have to get 1 right. And that will make up the sins of the 9. And so let me give a practical manifestation of that. So if you have 100,000 rand to invest, the power law says that don't put 100,000 in one company. Put 10,000 rand in 10 companies. And assume that 9 of them will fail.
Okay.
Now, because you are putting in 10 companies, come on, you got 10 questions, just get 1 right. So that's kind of that's what the power law is. That at least just get 1 answer right. and then you're off to and because you're going at early stage, so if you put 10,000 rand in a company at early stage, you may end up with, let's say, 2% or 5% or 10%, depending on what the valuation of the company.
Okay.
If 5 years later the company has grown, you've been diluted to probably 1%. But you're now 1% of a company that is worth 1 billion rand.
More. Right.
So if you exit the 1% of $1 billion company, you made 100 million rand.
Okay.
Remember, you went in, you had 100,000 rand.
Correct.
So now you've done 10x, or 100x, yeah.
Over a 5 to 10 year period.
Right.
But where does that patience come from?
And that's why you must only, the second law in the elite VC is that you must only invest money you can lose. And you must only invest money that, to your question, you can put away for at least 10 years. So if it's your kid's school fees, please
don't go and dabble.
Yeah. If it's your rent, don't put your rent in the company, because at the end of the month, your landlord will come. The landlord doesn't understand. I put money in a startup.
Tell me about LPs, general partners.
Yes. So the structure of a classic VC fund. So this is the model. Is that so obviously means somebody there has to be money to be invested.
Right.
So limited partners, LPs, are the guys who give you the money.
Right.
Somebody has to do the work, find the companies, the 10 companies, diligence the companies.
By the way, the LPs share the same mindset that you just talked about.
Very important. Okay. If they don't share that mindset, don't take their money.
Okay.
And there has to be strong alignment. So the GPs, which is the general partner, which is the other entity in a VC fund, an LP and a GP. Then the general partner means that they run the operation. They're general partners. They also put some money. You have to, put some money
in the game.
Skin in the game. And then you run the operation. So you go and find the companies, you will do the due diligence, you will execute the investment, and then you will add value, and then you monitor it to the exit. Then you collect the money. Then when you collect the money, now because the general partner is doing the day-to-day work, he has to have money to do the day-to-day work. So out of that, so let's go back to the 100,000 rand. He will get a 2% management fee
of the entire pool.
Every year to then run the operations.
Okay.
Right. So the 100,000 rand, not all of it goes to the startup if it's a VC fund. So it's 2% that is set aside to run the operations of the business.
Carry.
No, that is the management fee.
Okay.
Then when the 10-year cycle comes, then the VC will say, okay, now we have exited the business. We invested in 10, 9 of them failed, but one of them is become a billion rand company. We own 1% of it.
Feel free to use dollar. We're okay.
You're very kind. Anyway, so then that 1%, we own 1% now of a billion rand company. That's 100 million, rand that we own. But we put 100,000 rand, so then 10x of our money. So now that 100 million now, how would you split that return? Then we have something called waterfall. So now you say the distribution is based on a waterfall. So the first thing you do is you remove the management fee. So, we've been paying you 2% every day, so we take that out. And then we take the principal investments, right? And we give it to the LPs. Give it back. Okay. Right? Then what is left is split to 80-20. Okay. The LPs who brought the money get 80% of the profit. You, the general partner who did all the work, then get 20%. And so I'm sure you hear 220. 2% management fee, 20% carry.
Got you.
So you get 2% fee to run the business, the investment fund over its life. And then when you bring the profits, you will get 20%. The guys who brought the money, they don't get any fees, remember. They don't get a 2% fee, they don't get anything there. They have to wait 10 years. So when you now bring the money, their money, they get 80%. So that's the floor of how that business model works. Okay. And there are a bit of variations here and there that depend on country and context, but this is generally there.
Okay. And so now when you look at the continent and where Chanzo is investing, What are some of the spaces you guys are interested in? What is
Yeah.
your mandate? What is your focus?
So Chanzo, we when we started, you know, like I told you, we did it through the event. So every year, Angel Fair will run. We will then take company one investing. Then we'll invite other people who want to invest with us. So they'll come to the event and we'll say, hey, oh, Eric, I like Trade and Capital. That's an interesting company. Okay, we say we're putting some money. Say, oh, then we will join. Then somebody will say, you know, maybe I'll do it myself. Some of the guys who are also investors will say, okay, I will do my own due diligence on Trade and Capital and then put money. But someone will say, Eric, no, let me just give you the money. And then you go and do the investments. So then I become the GP. Then that money gave me, he's the LP.
Got you.
Right? So then I'll get a fee to run the operation, I'll do the investment, do the due diligence, make the investment. And then he will wait for when I do an exit, then I bring, you know, him his money back.
Right.
So that's how we built Chanzo Capital. Obviously, that was 2014. So we started Angel Fair in 2013. Actually, in 2014, we took the event to Nigeria.
Yeah.
And the reason we went to Nigeria was the Africa Venture Capital Association reached out to us. The 2013 event was very successful. So they reached out to us and said, we've heard you started this event and 3 deals happened, and so we're doing our event in Nigeria. Why don't you come and be a precursor to our event? Because we want to see what's happening in this early stage tech, investing startups, you know, the Africa Venture Capital focus on private equity and venture capital, like later stage investments, right? So we partnered with them and went to Nigeria, and towards the event, some of the managers, some of the guys who were, you know, big VP funds, they're like, hey, why don't we just give you the money and then you do this early stage investing, so that then you would then sort of create deal flow for us, so that we can then cherry pick from the company that you invest in, because you seem to know this early stage. It's very risky. It's very volatile.
Yes.
I don't want to invest in 10 companies and lose 9 of them. No. I don't have the stomach for that. But it looks like you can do that.
Right.
But then we can then pick that one that works, and then we will follow on. Right.
Okay.
So that's what, you know, prompted, you know, gave me sort of confirmation I needed to set up a vehicle. So launch Chanzo Capital, and Chanzo is a Swahili word for early stage or beginning. So that's the name. And so we wanted to be the first capital into early stage companies. And then I had, prior to that, during my hiatus years between entrepreneurship and starting, I wrote a book called The Kings of Africa's Digital Economy. So when I was transitioning, I kind of started saying, okay, so by this sort of 15 years that I've been kind of building ISPs, which countries are going to lead the digital economy on the continent? And I came up with Kenya, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa. So it's interesting that the team's cable was in Kenya, you know, so I didn't get another confirmation. So I wrote a book. I actually did an interview on this. It was one of the first probably podcasts I did, you know. And then wrote a book about it. And so I called our fund the Kings Fund. And the Angel Fair, we said, let's go to the Kings Fair. So we remember we started in South Africa, then they fully went to Nigeria. Then we went to Ghana after Nigeria. Then took it to, so every event, deals will happen. We will invest in some of the companies, some of the guys who come and invest with us, or they invest by themselves. And then the following we took it to Kenya in 2016, and then 2017 we went to Ivory Coast. The first time we took it to a francophone country. So that's how we completed the King cycle. And by that time we done about 16 investments. And then we branched out of the Kings. We took it to Tanzania. We took it to Mozambique, first Lusophone country in 2018, 2019.
Please tell me the key sectors you're focused on. Are you fintech, agri-tech?
Correct. So,
fintech?
So those were sort of what we call, the countries were sort of the dimensions,
yes,
right? And
Kings.
then the determinants were the sectors. So we had done stuff in fintech, was a majority, it's still the majority of our portfolio. EdTech, educational technology. Ag tech was health tech, and then the last one was clean tech. So initially it was 5 countries, 5 sectors. So dimensions and determinants. And internally we have a plot where we looked at, you know, you see which country and then which sector. And by and large, today, if you look at the ecosystem, I think we're pretty much on point when you look at which countries that and which sectors. Probably the only country we missed was Egypt, which is in North Africa, but that's not a whole story, because Southern North Africa we focus on Sub-Saharan Africa and not the whole of Africa. But yes, Egypt has been one of the countries that has punched above its weight, and it's one of the top 4 that receives VC investments with some of the most innovative ecosystem for tech. So and now Tunisia as well, Morocco. And so we begin to look at North Africa in that regard.
There's a sense that, at least in the US at the moment, there's a sense that a lot of VC capital, particularly in the US, all of it is going into AI investments. Some of which is on these LLMs that do not even have any revenue. Billions.
There's a company that launched and they don't even have a product, and they are at 21 billion.
21 billion.
The former
valuation.
CTO of.
They're launching this, SIS or whatever. Give me your thoughts on that. And we definitely need a part 2, by the way. So this we'll continue this one in part 2.
Okay.
But I want to get your thoughts.
I think AI. The thing in the US, and as you know, I live in Silicon Valley partly, is that it's a very thematically driven, technology driven ecosystem, and it's because of where it is at the cutting edge of technology, right? And so. Just a few years ago, it was blockchain. Do you remember everybody and their dog had a blockchain?
Correct, in crypto.
In crypto. And people started blockchain companies, and now it's AI. Tomorrow it will be something else. But
you think AI is a bubble?
I think it's a bubble. I don't know when it will burst, but I think that So my big thesis is applying technology to real life situations. So at Chanzo, that's how we have fintech, edtech. Our thinking is it's not the technology, it's how you apply it to solve problems that is important. So when we look at opportunities, that's how we look at opportunity. So how do you apply AI to Africa? And Africa has some real challenges that AI could really solve. So for example, one of it is the language barrier. Right? Africa has multiple languages. But the national languages are English or French or Portuguese, right? It's what people study in. So imagine that you can use AI to sort of, cross that language barrier, where somebody who cannot speak English, but is smart, can actually speak in their local language, and then AI can transcribe it into the language that the machines can understand. I think that could be very powerful. Suddenly you overcome that illiteracy barrier that we call in Africa, right? Second is African history is oral, right? Majority of our history is not being stored in written form. But with AI, you can do that. You can now take oral history and transcribe it.
Say more. Most of our history is oral.
Oral. In other words,
we've got it on tapes.
Well, before tapes, an old man, your great-grandfather need a story and then pass it on to your father. And your father told you the story.
Okay, so we can document.
Yeah. So it's not that African history doesn't exist, but it exists in a form that the current formats. So, today if you go to Timbuktu, which is one of the places of African learning, there's a lot of African history and scripts and intellectual work that is being wasted away. You can use AI to transcribe all that content. And also the AI machines, AI is just sort of a typical technological innovation where the reality is that you are actually inputting data into, models. And if you don't have the data to input the models, then the models won't churn out anything. So I think that a real AI issue when it comes to Africa is how do we get our data in there so that the models can understand our data, our context, our culture, our reality, so that it can begin to interpret and spew it back in a way that is relevant to us. So that's, for example, if we look at AI, we've done 1 or 2 investments in that space. That's what we're looking at.
In local LLMs or just,
Yeah. Okay. So we tell our companies that the key thing is not to worry now about building your own, language models. Is how do you get data, right? Because if you build the models and you don't have the data that's relevant to your context, you still have to get the data.
That's true.
So why not focus now on getting the data first? Because some of the models are already built that you can customize. So I believe that your advantage will be on this side more than on that side, right, as it pertains now. But that's not to say that if you can build your own model, you shouldn't build them. I'm just saying that as you build them, you have to think about the data that will train the models, so the models can now begin to do what you want them to do, the way you want them to do it, in the context in which you want to do them. You know, people have talked about AI for good, because people say AI is discriminatory because the data is, you know, the data sets that are put in it doesn't support certain races, doesn't support certain cultures, doesn't support certain people. So if you ask them a question about certain places, for example, as you get is like, come on, man.
Right.
But it's a machine. So if you put in, there's no data, right, it will come up with, but if you give it the real data.
It's preloaded, it's ideology, whatever. Okay. I'm glad we got to do this again. There's another one we have to do, but very, very thoughtful insights. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing the history, and I'll see you in part 2. Safe travels until we speak again. Comment, like, you know, tell a friend to tell a friend. Whatever comments and thoughts you have. I'm actually thinking about putting all of Eric's books on the Winners Win website, which I'll announce soon, and you'll be able to pick them up from there and read the story of what I think has been a very fascinating journey with very high impact. This is the Winners Win podcast. We're out.